How you guys been doing? Where y'all coming from?
Mesquite, Texas.
Mesquite, Texas. Brother Mike Wells' church, right? Yeah. Been there a number of times when I've been down there on business, so yeah. Take your Bibles and turn to Ecclesiastes Chapter 10. We're continuing to look at the book of Ecclesiastes. We'll look at, I think, verse 15 through the end of the chapter. I'll go ahead and read that now. Ecclesiastes 10, starting at verse 15. The labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. Woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child, and thy princes eat in the morning. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season for strength and not for drunkenness. By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. Curse not the king, no, not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. For a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. I don't know about you, but I really enjoy Solomon. Solomon, the insight and wisdom that he gives us, obviously through the Holy Spirit, for life has helped me, I think, more than any other thing in life. Obviously, the Word of God. Love the Word of God. Verse 15, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them. The labors of fools. I think that's speaking about verse 13 and 14, where it talks about the speaking of the fool, the things they say, but in verse 15, the doing. Whatever this foolish person says or does brings weariness and worrisomeness to the boss, to other employees, and to himself. I was in the Air Force many decades ago, and I have thought about this often over the years. I probably would have stayed in the military, Roy, if it wasn't for the foolishness of foolish people that I saw and the worrisomeness that I saw of those that I was in the military with. It was much like this. If you wouldn't work, you could skate by and get by with anything. But if you would work, they would work your tail off. And I thought, who is the fool? Them or me for working hard? The worrisomeness of the foolish is bothersome to everybody that's around them, to themselves, to their bosses, and to those that have to put up with them. I thought about some of the guys I was in the Air Force with, and I remember even during promotion time, the foolish who were worrisome to everybody wouldn't get promoted, but neither would the people who worked hard. It was based upon some extracurricular things that I didn't want to be a part of, and I'm not going to dive into that. But why is it like that? The verse continues, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. The highway to the city. What is God trying to say about this part? He knoweth not how to go to the city. That road, that big road that's usually broad and well maintained, that's usually plain and easy to find, yet it cannot be found by the foolish man. What is he saying about that? What is he trying to convey? I think he's saying that this foolish guy, the guy that skates by in life, the guy that brings worrisomeness to all that are around him, to his boss, to his fellow employees, and to himself, he's the guy that will talk of perplexing things, of obscure things. He's a guy that's all talk and no show. Do you know anybody like that? A guy that's full of things to say to somebody, but the actions of his life produce nothing that are beneficial for him and for others. Does that make any sense? I hope that makes sense to some people. Have you ever known somebody like that, who is all talk and no show. This guy cannot find his way to the city. And if he gets to the city, he's a guy that doesn't know how to behave himself in the city. He talks out of turn. He does things that he shouldn't. He is incivil and impolite to others. There was a guy that said this about this particular verse. He says, he does not go where wise men dwell to learn instruction from them. I think the overarching point of this verse is, do we listen? Are we available for instruction? None of us in this room know it all. Nobody. None of us know it all. All of us need instruction in life. We need to listen in life. I think one of the greatest things my mother taught me in life was this: listen. Listen when somebody else is trying to tell you something. Listen to what they are saying. I don't care if it's somebody that is inferior from a positional standpoint or somebody that is superior from a positional standpoint. It is always good to listen. We've become a society that will not listen. We know it all. Just go observe some young folks in today's society. You can tell them nothing. You can tell them nothing about life. That person does not know the way to the city. That path that is very visible, that anybody can get on, that anybody can establish their track of life on. These people will not listen and follow the advice of somebody else. Do we listen? Do we heed what's being told? One of my heroes of life said, and he probably wasn't original with him, but he said, all men are my teachers. And that's true. I found as I lead people at work, the insight that I get about the problems of work mostly come from those people that report to me, listening to what they have to say. It slays me when we're in church and the preacher is on a point that is insightful for life, that will help me in life, and I see this. I want to say, listen, you are hearing something right now that will help you today and tomorrow in life. Listen to what's being said. Heed what's being said. It is the highway to the city that will help us gain insight. I don't know about you. I need insight for life. I am 63 today. Happy birthday, Jeff. You know what? I realize today I need insight more today than I realized when I was 20. I need God's guidance for my life, for the decisions of life, how I interact with people, how I help guide and direct my kids and my grandkids. I have to do it differently today than I did when they were in my house. I have to do it with influence. I need God to help me to understand how to interact with people. And by the way, so do you. We need that in life. That is exactly what we need in life. Verse 16. Hey, brother, good to have you back. Good to see you. Brother Mike just got back from the Congo, the Republic of Congo, and Grant as well. Good to see you, brother. Verse 16. Woe to thee, O land, when thy king is a child. I think it's talking about age, but it's not necessarily talking about age. Though it is unusual for happiness to be found in a nation when it is governed by a minor, and this is much more applicable in times. We can understand it. I shouldn't say it's more applicable. We can understand it better if we were living in times when there were kings and queens and they ascended based on their birth rather than their achievement. It's unusual for a nation to be happy being governed by a minor. Now that was not always the case. I think we can look at some times in the Bible when a young Solomon was leading a country right, or a young Joash or Uzziah or Hosea. And in more recent times, 200 years ago, when Edward VI led England as a young minor, the nation was good and happy and prosperous. But that's not always the case. Usually there's a lot of concern about a nation, a family, a church, when it's led by somebody that lacks maturity, that lacks wisdom, that lacks discernment. A child just doesn't understand. And as an older guy, the age of a child in my mind keeps rising. I used to think, 10 was old, and then 18. Now I think 35's young. I think that just is a part of growing old. But as you look at what a minor, a child would do in a leadership role, the manner of their life, how they conduct their life, how they often live for pleasure, how they are often fickle and changeable rather than being on a path, on a direction of how they're going to live. They're often self-willed. They're unskillful in leadership. And again, it goes to this same point as the previous verse. They will not be advised. I think he hits this point over and over again. Listening, be willing to be advised. He goes on in the next part of that verse and says, the princes eat in the morning. As I read that, I thought, man, that is an innocuous verse on the surface. He eats in the morning. I mean, what are you trying to say, Lord? But he's just like the child that he referenced. He gets up and he wants to consume as a priority what he needs, what is important to him. He wants to satisfy his own passions. He's thinking about self first. As soon as he's out of bed, it's about him in life. But not only does he eats to excess in an intemperate manner. It's been stated that this prince in this verse eats bread before he even offers the morning daily sacrifice. In other words, everything he does is for himself. Do you want to be miserable in life? Do you want to be worried about life? Do you want to have problems in life? Worry about yourself first. Think about your needs and what you want. That is the recipe for worry, for depression, for problems in life. Getting out of bed, thinking about what you need first is not going to make you happy. It's not going to give you a blessed life. It does the counter of that. And I think that is what God is saying here. Years ago, I read a book called Leaders Eat Last. Has anybody ever read that book? Leaders Eat Last. It's about a guy that led a group of Marines. He's a Marine Corps officer. And I think this was taking place either in Iraq or Afghanistan. I can't remember. Do you recall? Iraq or Afghanistan. And he told all of his fellow officers, you eat last. You let the guys out doing the work eat first, because it's not about you, it's about them. It developed a like and a trust that the ground Marines had for the officers. They understood all of this is not about me. I'm the top ranking guy. This is about me. No, they understood it's about somebody else. We ought to live a life where leaders eat last, where we look to do for somebody else. I've been there before, where I desired for self, and I thought self was going to be happy and satisfied. and the opposite ends up happening. Self becomes disgruntled. Self doesn't like life. Self doesn't like anything that's transpiring around him because it's all about me. Then I realized I need to do for others. And my attitude of life changed. It changed. My wife is smiling because she knows it's the truth. If we want contentment and peace in life, we need to be about somebody else. We need to be looking. Again, the same hero of life that I talked about earlier, Jack Hiles, said that a lady was coming to him and was having issues and problems in life. She was depressed. She was miserable in life. And he quickly realized that she was living life for her. Everything she did was for her. And he says, I want you to do this. I want you to find somebody that needs something, that is down, that is having a rough time, and go bake them some cookies, bake them a cake, and do something for them. She thought, well, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm the one with the problem. He said, do this, try it, I don't remember, try it for a week, for 2 weeks, and come back and we'll talk again. She came back, and she had a different attitude about her. It was a new her. And he said, well, how's this going? I don't know. He said, I'm too busy. I got to take this over to this person and this over to this person. And it changed her life. My question is this. What are you doing for somebody else? What are you doing for somebody else? What have we put aside that we want and put somebody else as a priority in our life and put our effort, our energy, our vitality into what they need? It will change our attitude of life. I promise you that. That's what Solomon is saying here. Anyway, that was leaders eat last. You know, it's a sad state when a nation has a king or a president or a leader who is a foolish one, who has advisors that are a foolish one, whose ministers of state and counselors look to please themselves through enrichment in, let's say, China, through enrichment through other means, rather than being concerned about the people that they lead. Let's go to verse 17 for time's sake. Blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles. This is really the counter to the previous verse. He gives us the exact opposite to the previous verse. Nobles, or in some Hebrew texts, that term is translated heroes, which signifies robed in white. This noble, heroic leader, robed in white, either from the garments that they wear, but I don't think that's what it's talking about. I think it's from the purity of their life. I think it's from the ingenuity of their mind and how they act. Isn't it wonderful to know that you have a leader that is about you and not themselves, who acts with nobility, who acts with purity in mind, who acts with right as their guiding force, doing right. Isn't it wonderful to be led by somebody like that, whether it's the king or the president or the pastor or the husband or the boss, where purity and right is the guiding force of their life. How wonderful is it to have somebody that's noble like that, leading and guiding us in life. He's a man that will imitate his heroic ancestors and tread in their steps. And in time, he becomes viewed as somebody that has wisdom, and somebody that has virtue because of the actions of his life. I pose this question: what do the actions of our life tell other people about us? Do we act with nobility, seeking virtue as a guiding force in our life? Or do we serve self in life? True nobility resides in doing right, in being the right example that we should be in life. Verse 17 continues, "And thy prince eat in due season for strength and not for drunkenness." Do you see the comparison between verse 16 and verse 17? Look at verse 16 again, the last part, "And thy prince eat in the morning." And verse 17, "And thy prince eat in due season." Do you see the comparison there? Eating at the proper time that he was to eat, in due season. After this prince, the good prince I'll call him, did the business of the day. See, he wasn't worried about filling belly first. He was worried about doing what needed to be done first, in due season. He was only worried about eating to refresh himself, not in a gluttonous endeavor like the prince in verse 16. He was eating it because he needed to. It's part of what he needed to do in order to be of further service to those that he was serving. A servant leader. He's the boss, but he realizes he is serving others. You know, history tells us this, throughout all of history really, that the fourth hour of the day was the time when the good kings, the good princesses eat. You know, when is the fourth hour of the day? 10 o'clock. Because they were busy doing what they should be doing first. Solomon, the Lord, is giving us a great example here for life. We're either going to put ourselves first or we're going to put others first. And there are consequences on both sides. How are we living and leading our lives? The verse goes on, and the last part of the phrase says, "Not for drunkenness." This good prince, what wasn't eating and drinking for merriment or for getting drunk, which sort of conveys loosely that the one in verse 16 was. Did you know that the Egyptians had a law that they would only give their Pharaoh and his sons a certain amount of wine to drink a day, and that was it, no more, because they didn't want them to get drunk. Solon's law was given to the Athenians that if a prince was found drunk, do you know what the punishment was? Death. The heathens knew how bad this was. I don't think I have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You shouldn't be drinking. Okay? No drinking. The Indians, this type, not this type, if a woman killed a drunken king, her reward was that she got to marry his successor. They hated drunkenness, hated it. This, I think, shows that even heathen people abhorred drunkenness, especially in their kings and princesses. Proverbs 31:4 says this, "It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink." Even Plato, I am not a Plato fan, but I couldn't believe this quote when I saw it. Drunkenness ought to be abstained from, and rather it should not be allowed to a keeper. That is the keeper of a city, a ruler, a mayor, if you will, somebody in authority of a city. For it would be ridiculous for a keeper to need a keeper. That's Plato. Man, that is what Solomon is saying here. You know, the prince, the king, he knows what's important in life. It's not feeding his own flesh. It's not getting drunk. It's doing the business and service for others. Like taking of your life and going to the Congo. Like taking Bibles all around the world. Like working Rock of Ages, I think you said. Doing for others. We're going to get to the end of life. I often think, and this sounds like I'm a morbid guy, I am not, but I think, what is the last day of my life like? And what will I think about on the last day of my life? It won't be about making money. It'll be how I have served Him and done for others. If I know that that's what the last day of my life I'm going to think about, why don't I think about it today and do those things today and change the direction of my life today and serve others today? That's what Solomon is conveying to us. Verse number 18. By much slothfulness, the building decayeth. I believe that really Solomon is speaking in reference to the previous verses, not only the ones we've read, but previous in the chapter, and allowing the building to decay. Slothfulness, much slothfulness is really talking about slothfulnesses, multiple slothfulnesses, much slothfulnesses, doing a lot of things where we are just letting the building fall apart. I think he's talking about the hands that I neglect to work with for others, the feet that I neglect to use to help others. The word building in that verse it could indicate the beam. I'm building a house. Brother Phil and Brother Eugene are building me a log cabin now, and they're putting up the beams, the rafters. You know, you leave one of those out or you put a rotten piece of a beam in there, it won't be long till the water gets in, till the wind gets in, and the storms of life break the building down. Slothfulness is not good. Spending our energy doing and working for others is good. Are we? Are we doing and work? I got to tell you, I am most miserable when I'm doing things for myself. I am. I am most happy when I'm doing something. Are y'all like that? When I'm doing something for somebody else. Why do you think that that's the way it is? Because that's what God intends for us to do, to live and do for others. The building caving in, it could really happen, but I think it's a figurative thing that in reality is talking about the family, it's talking about the church, it's talking about kingdoms, it's talking about nations. Why is our country falling in? Why? Because we have changed the foundation, the building, the beams from what it was to self. I'm in the corporate world. I think before you became a preacher, you were in the corporate world. It's all about money and self. That's not what life was meant to be about. Through the sluggishness and slothfulness and the lack of mastery, we see families falling apart. We see governments falling apart. And I got about 5 minutes. And the verse continues, and through idleness of hands, the house droppeth through. Doing nothing is not an option. the house will fall through. Let's get busy in life, doing and serving others. Verse 19, a feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. The feast here is not a common dinner. It's a special dinner. It's an extravagant dinner. It's a dinner that cost some moolah. They're spending a lot of money on it. It's to promote mirth and gaiety. I told you a few weeks ago, what does mirth mean? Huh? Who remembers? Yeah, mirth. When I first saw that word years ago, I thought, that sounds sad. But that's not what mirth means. It means happiness. It means having a fun time. But mirth and gaiety is what this feast is about. A feast is made for laughter. It's to promote mirth and gaiety, almost to an excessive degree. And then the verse goes on, and wine maketh merry. You know, getting drunk is not a good thing, as we said earlier. But for a little while, people think they're having a good time. They forget their sorrows for a little bit. But this is the part I want to get to, but money answereth all things. This is not saying money's the answer to everything. That's not what this is saying. but really it stands in the stead of all things. By it, men get what they want. It answers the request. I got to tell you, in life, there have been times when I was young, we were poor and we couldn't buy a thing. Life is not like that for me now. But I see money in a different light than I did when I was younger. I wanted to earn money when I was younger because I thought it was the answer to life. Now that I've done well in life, I realize it's not the answer to everything in life. I could have gaiety with that. I could have a party. I could have a feast. But really what he's saying here is this, and just for time's sake, I'm skipping ahead. Those first two phrases in that verse, he's expressing how we waste and the things that we do that we think are going to bring happiness and contentment will not. When the prince, we're talking about the prince in this chapter. He goes and he buys and he spends a lot on his feast and all that. When he runs out of money, what does he do? When the prince runs out of money, what does he do? He levies more taxes on you and gets it from you. That's what the prince does. He's obliged to raise taxes and impose new taxes. But the third phrase, I think, is what he's really teaching here is this. When you have what you've gotten, when you have money, use it right. Be frugal with it, but also look to see who you can help with what you got. Money answereth all things. Brother Mike, as he's getting ready to go to the Congo, is taking John and Romans, I think. Brother Mike, I don't know this for sure, but I think Brother Mike probably didn't have a couple of $1,000s in his pocket to go buy. But money answereth all things. Oh, he needs that? I have that, and I can help. Money answereth all things. Taking Bibles to Asia. Money answereth all things. God is telling us very simply in these verses, with your life, with the things that he gives you, with the things he gives me, look to do for somebody else. We live a life like that, and it will change our attitude of life. We're dismissed. Good to have you back, brother.